I'm Phoebe, and I am a person with a lived experience of mental and emotional distress and a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, and several others. That seems to be the most popular and enduring one. I actually no longer buy into psychiatric diagnoses and social labels for several important educational, personal, professional, research, evidence and values-based reasons. So this is really more of a disclaimer that I'm not aligned with the biomedical and disease model in mental health care. Now I'm going to be reading my presentation today, which isn't my usual style. I'd normally memorise, rehearse and give it out verbatim without any notes, but I was having major surgery around the time of the booking. I said, don't worry, I'll still be there. And then ended up in emergency surgery last week. So my preparation just was cut, was demicated somewhat. I am here. I'm here with only half my chest, long story, and my hair today is another story. I'm not going to go there. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk about an important issue of isolation and loneliness and its adverse effects on our health, individually and collectively. We can feel it personally, as families, workplaces, communities, as a society and as a nation. I immigrated here to Perth in mid-2002, and I must say that at the time, I believe relocating here would not be too difficult. I was wrong. I thought that Australia, being a Commonwealth country with the same first language, would be almost the same as England, but with better weather. You know, like the sun. Same thing but warmer, I generally thought, I think. I was quite wrong because what I experienced was a huge culture shock. Things and people were not the same. They were really quite different. And I struggled for some time to find my place, a sense of belonging, make friends, and really understand the culture and lifestyle here in WA. I arrived here in quite strenuous circumstances at several levels and immediately faced some tough times for so many reasons, and two of which were isolation and loneliness. I'd left all my lifelong friends in the UK. My father and my husband, my fiancé at the time, had also left behind all of his friends and every single family member that he had. To be honest, leaving my father and my friends was not a major issue to me when considering my emigration. I'm quite self-contained and I knew I could call and write to my friends and visit them upon my return trips to the UK. I always felt like someone who'd end up somewhere else and was confident in the authenticity and strength of my friendships to last a lifetime, and they have, so far. So, personal connections was never something likely to commit me to living in the same location all of my life, and I'd actually always dreamed of moving to America. My husband and I arrived here to be with my mother and stepfather, so I at least did have two family members here for me. But my husband had no one from his own family. My mother had begun a struggle for mental health shortly after arriving here in 2000, 2 years before my husband and I emigrated here. And when we flew in, we arrived to the reality that my mother's husband had left her and returned to the UK. He had left her unwell, and so one of my immediate roles was as a carer, which is a lot on top of an emigration. Emigration is known to be one of the strongest catalysts for individuals to encounter some kind of breakdown, particularly people susceptible due to past trauma. It had happened to my mother, and sometime later, it happened to me. The first 7 months were the most stressful. On top of my husband's visa requirements, both of us were trying to find employment, encountering financial struggles, trying to find housing, moving house twice, buying vehicles, setting up our identities and insurances, which my mother was able to help with, having done that herself already. We were also planning our wedding, Most of that was me, because, you know, the bride. Not a sexist comment, but I was totally all over this, yeah. We had 2 car accidents as well, numerous difficulties, and all the while doing our best in supporting my mother, who'd been left in a terrible situation, financially and health-wise. This seems a little off topic, but is an important introduction to the topic today, and sets the scene for one of my first examples of the effects of isolation and loneliness. My first encounter with isolation and loneliness was not solely my own. It was what I had to witness my mother encounter that wounded me deeply. My mother had been enduring extreme mental and emotional issues and had received a psychiatric diagnosis due to an entire childhood of incredible trauma and a lifetime of associated emotional damage and psychological distress. She has always been a Christian and was attending a church here in WA in an attempt to both seek social connection with like-minded people whilst alone in a new country, and to desperately lean on her faith as her only source of meaningful internal support, the love and support of her God. She contributed and connected with her church peers and took a fellow Christian into her home. They had cared for and supported each other. Sadly, this individual was damaged and wounded themselves and betrayed my mother by setting out to destroy her social standing within the church. This resulted in stories, rumours, gossip, all of which was unfounded and cruel. When we discovered the source and details, it was too late. The church community rejected my mother, and she was ostracised from the group, from the only people that she knew. People she'd respected, trusted, and befriended. You'd expect that people of faith would be the most kind, giving and accepting in our society, but these people were not, and it had disastrous and tragic consequences for my mother. I could see how intensely painful it was for my mother, and her pain was my pain. Unfortunately, I formed at that point a pretty cynical view of WA community, and it angered me deeply. It was not until later that I discovered that mental health issues were not publicly well understood here, not compared to where we had come from, and that in reality WA was a couple of decades behind other places in the world, with still quite high levels of social stigma, prejudice and discrimination towards people in distress and those with these psychiatric diagnoses. This knowledge deepened during my own journey to wellbeing and when I commenced my own career in mental health. And I'm glad to say that things have moved on a bit since then, and there has been and still are some innovative and positive initiatives and mental health awareness raising both in WA and Australia as a whole. I don't think that we're quite where we need to be yet, and we're still a long way behind in our service provision, and much reform is needed, but that's not my topic today. I'm delighted to say that my mother eventually found another church along her journey and a sense of belonging. I'm unsure if it can be attributed to beautiful people or the fact that my mother chose not to discuss her mental health in detail with her peers. But she recovered fully from all of her difficulties, built an accomplished career. For a while, we only had each other. I later encountered my own psychological breakdown, but began to recover, and then my brother and sister-in-law emigrated here too, to be with us. My nephew was born, and I had my own child in March 2017. And now we're much more of a family, and everything's working out beautifully. My mother's retired now from the workplace, but has a wonderful peer group in her final chosen church, where she contributes to a high level with the administration of their seminars, using her advanced graphic skills and nuanced knowledge in IT. She's now enjoying being a grandmother to 3 beautiful children, while still building her own part-time businesses in the other things that she loves. I have also recovered and built an accomplished career and a happy life. As I said, our individual stories and our family story ended well. And, well, it continues. We made it through those storms, but we're in much happier chapters now. So isolation and loneliness is more of a serious issue than I think most realise. There are some alarming facts and statistics on this issue. And as I move through my presentation, I'll include some of those and also speak of more examples, sharing more of my own story. So I'm here to do a bit of my own storytelling and some facts and figures, and so hopefully this will make for quite a well-rounded presentation. So first, according to the 2018 Australian Loneliness Report, this is by the Australian Psychological Society, 1 in 4 people reported feeling loneliness each week. 1 in 2 people reported feeling lonely at least one day in a week. And nearly 55% of people felt that they lacked companionship at least sometimes. In a recent Relationships Australia study, it was revealed that 1 in 10 people lack social support. And the earlier studies revealed that somewhere between 17 and 60% of people said that they were lonely. So having just stated that statistic, if we look around amongst ourselves in the room, someone, if not a few of us in here now, are quite possibly feeling lonely and isolated, and perhaps holding that in silence. For me, the experience of isolation, loneliness, isolation from everyone and everything I knew was insidious. I didn't fully notice when I first arrived here. There was all the excitement of a new country, the thought of starting a new life, and of course there was a lot of important practical matters to be dealt with. It was shortly after arriving that I fully appreciated my mother's circumstances, and as I tried my best to support her, began feeling a little distressed myself. I became more cognizant that I didn't have anyone nearby to talk to. Calling my friends in England wasn't as easy as I thought. There's obviously a significant time difference between WA and the UK, and when it was daytime here and I was able to talk, it was between the middle of the night or early morning in England. My friends all worked full time, and so when they would be arriving home, it was in the middle of the night for me, and I needed sleep and rest. I've also never been very good with phone calls, and I do prefer face-to-face interactions. And this was before the days of Skype, video calling, online community groups, advertising their social events, and before social media. We really had no connection to anyone. At this point, I'd like to also make the comment that even when someone is surrounded by people in relationships and friendships, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not lonely. It's about an authentic level of connection that feeds the soul. It seems odd that in a world now where it's viewed that people are more socially connected than ever before by the online world of virtual cyber and digital connectivity. 2016 Lifeline survey of over 3,000 people revealed that 4 out of 5 people believe that loneliness in society is on the rise. I was also mindful that my husband had no one either, and I worried a lot about him too. I'd taken my fiancé thousands of miles away from every single person in his life, into a stressful situation in which he also needs to help support my mother's health, a woman who doesn't really know, as well as finding a job and bringing in some money. I couldn't find a job for quite some time when I first got here, and my mother was unable to work. She had pretended she had enough to get by, but that story soon unravelled, a harsh financial truth. Very difficult for a proud woman who has worked all of her life. We were all worried, and there were a few points at which things looked very bleak indeed. It's difficult when you're planning a wedding day. Your family and friends cannot attend, except 4 people, and they were my father, my brother, and sister-in-law, and my best friend. And your husband has no one from his circle attending. And my husband had made one friend at a job out here, And once I was working, I had 3 colleagues, but they weren't really my friends. They were people a lot older than me with their own lives, and weren't the people that were going to take me out for a few drinks. My stepfather's sister and children were living here, but I didn't really know them either. So no one really local to invite. And so when you know that if you're in the UK and your home land, you'd have maybe 200 or 300 people at a wedding, but you're in a new country now and you've got 17 people coming, it's quite difficult. It was only when my mother was settling and my husband and I moved into our own place that we were fortunate to have 2 neighbours, a teenage couple with a baby. We were in our 20s, so they were younger than us, but we're young at heart. And we were so glad to be befriended by 2 lovely, kind, sociable and generous people. We go to their house often and sit on the veranda with a few drinks and a takeaway. They were the only 2 people we could say we were friends with in WA for some time, and they were our only source of personal interaction and normality for quite some time. In fact, I distinctly remember the day, early in 2005, when my husband and I were walking through a shopping centre. A woman I'd met through some means at some point after arriving saw us and stopped to say hello. When she continued on, I stopped for a moment and considered what had just happened. I said to my husband, "Oh my God, it finally happened. Someone knows me, someone stopped to say hello to me." It dawned on me that I'd been here for over 2 years, and with the exception of our neighbours and one work friend, no one knew me. I'd been walking around like a ghost. I was essentially faceless. I had no circle. I knew 3 people, but there were not numerous friends or even acquaintances that I might bump into. No one would recognise me. The same for my husband. I fully acknowledged that we'd not really been living here. We'd been existing here in isolation. And it was a painfully memorable moment in my life. I'm not surprised by my own craving for social interaction and connection when I first arrived here. I'd often talk to people in shops just to feel some level of connection. I'm not surprised by a fact uncovered by Queensland University, that people who are frequent attenders at a GP are more isolated, more likely to be isolated and lonely. They equal about 10% of patients and account for 50% of appointments. This is often the case with new migrants to a country. An article by Brianna Roberts for SBS Australia references Pete Schmigel, lifetime CEO of Lifeline. We've got an increasing number of people calling us from migrant community backgrounds. And I being from, Mother England, I find that really relatable. And I speak the same language and have a very similar culture. So I really find that idea that if it was that hard for me, if people who don't speak a lot of this language and come from such a different culture, I can imagine how enormously difficult it is and how lonely those people are from my own experience of loneliness. Oh, skipped forward a slide. Fortunately, our isolation and loneliness ended when my husband and I decided to return to college and began studying as mature age students. I wanted to complete what was then the WA TtRH and go to medical school here. And our college days are some of our fondest early memories here. Isolation and loneliness entered my life for the second time after my breakdown after college and during my journey of recovery. It is sad that whilst an individual struggles with mental health, that they often end up struggling with isolation and loneliness as well. And vice versa, the two seem to be interdependent. And so there are some really harmful effects from isolation and loneliness, both physically and mentally. More anxiety about social interactions, and loneliness increases the likelihood of social anxiety by 13.1%. Being socially anxious increases the likelihood of being lonely by 8.6%. Isolation and loneliness means social interaction decreases even with family and the friends and neighbours someone does have. Symptoms of depression increase, Loneliness increases likelihood of depression by 15.2%. And being depressed increases the likelihood of being lonely. There's poorer psychological health, more negative emotions and fewer positive ones, poorer overall quality of life. Lonely and isolated people are often more likely to suppress their emotions, and they are also less likely to be able to change the way they think about a difficult situation. According to Dr. Dingle from the University of Queensland, referencing the Ways to Wellness Social Isolation Project, loneliness has significant effects on health and well-being, being linked to poor mental health and increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, and premature death. Social isolation has been shown to pose a greater health threat than smoking, poor diet, and lack of exercise. And according to Amy Morin, lonely people are 50% more likely to die prematurely than those with healthy social relationships. And this was surprising, loneliness is as lethal as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. After the onset of completely losing my psychological well-being, I later felt totally lost and endured quite the identity crisis on several levels, and it's a key theme of my personal story. So much had happened in my life. There had been adversity and trauma in my early years, all of which I thought I could leave behind me in the UK. It seemed that the immigration, what I encountered here in those first difficult couple of years, and my extremely stressful journey as a student, despite great academic achievement and a very strong application to medical school before my breakdown, was all just simply too much for me. And by late 2007, I was admitted to a psychiatric clinic with the onset of my immense psychological problems. At one stage during my identity loss and the struggle to regain it, re-identification I call it, and I do hope to publish my book on what I postulate is a personal recovery subtype. I eventually lost all three of my closest friends. Losing friendships is incredibly painful because it's so deeply personal, and it does make you question yourself, your self-worth, and ask yourself if you are innately unlovable. You try to analyse where things went wrong, question what you might have done differently, what your friends really think of you, and of course, there's the feelings of guilt, shame, and self-blame. I think there was fault on all our parts, and I own my share unequivocally. I'd slipped into a deep despair about who I was, where I was in my life, and where I'd ultimately end up. Made all the more painful by how well my friends were doing in their lives. It wasn't jealousy, I was genuinely happy for them, but it compounded my own feelings of inadequacy and self-esteem. Very depressing. I consequently became quite self-involved, self-interested, self-consumed perhaps, and could only really focus on myself. And other aspects of my ill health, my journey, and my mental instability meant that my social and relationship skills diminished. Although a naturally empathetic person, as many of us are, I was unable to afford the same level of care and support to my friends. They had stopped visiting or even calling me when I was in hospital, which broke my heart, and I withdrew from them further, knowing that the friendships were disintegrating. Eventually, I was at the point where I was not even displaying enough interest, really, in their lives, for which I am deeply regretful. And I'm also regretful that I never got a chance to explain myself, and I feel that we perhaps all could have repaired those friendships, but it wasn't to be. Since this painful part of my experience and my journey of recovery, or discovery as I prefer to call it, I consequently became even more empathetic, deeply empathetic, than ever before. Of course I did. That happens to all of us with a lived experience of any kind of distress. It changes many of our perspectives, our worldview, and how we treat others. I'm always very conscious in all of my friendships since to communicate differently. It's difficult losing losing friends at a time for any reason, but when you also have struggles with mental and emotional well-being and are left to battle on your own without peers, life becomes even more challenging. So many of us experience loneliness and isolation for different reasons, and it's not a small problem for a minority. Again, I'm referencing Dr. Dingle because great work here at Queensland University. It is a widespread problem. In a 2018 Australian survey, 50% of people reported feeling lonely in the week of the survey. Nearly a third rarely felt they were part of a group of friends, and 3/4 never or seldom had a neighbour available to talk to. The doctor made another important remark regarding Australian loneliness report, that loneliness affects people of all ages, genders and cultural backgrounds. Yes, it does. Isolation and loneliness, similarly to what is referred to as mental illness, does not discriminate. It can happen to absolutely anyone for any reason. What's important is how we respond as human beings, as family, friends, peers, workplaces, communities and societies. Human beings, like many other mammals and animals, require some form of meaningful connection and or some level of social connection and belonging. For us, it doesn't have to be quantity but rather quality. Our sense of deep connectivity with each other is necessary for our health and well-being in so many ways. And in my conclusion to this presentation, I'm just going to outline how I feel we can tackle this, or what my dreams for society would be. I think that the first requirement for true social inclusivity, social cohesion, and the eradication of stigma, prejudice, harmful and or unuseful binaries, stereotypes, and discrimination towards people living in distress is the same precedent to combat social isolation and loneliness. The two are inextricably linked. What is required before all else is empathy. The famous psychologist Carl Rogers contributed hugely to the understanding of this aspect of therapeutic relationships, and so much more. We must be able to empathise with each other. Only when we are able to empathise can we better understand each other. And understanding elicits the fulfilment of our needs, the asking, answering, giving and receiving. And this brings deeper connection. Through deeper connection comes acceptance. Acceptance of all people, despite their behaviours, struggles, personalities, perspectives, personal beliefs and values, and their life choices. And importantly, acceptance of people who may appear different in a way we are unsure of. We must accept all people where they are at, for who they really are, whether they're self-actualised or not. Once we have acceptance, only then can our communities evolve to achieve some kind of collective self-actualisation. And I've just got this slide here because I'm a big follower of the Disorder for Everyone. This is like a conference group from the UK that move around. Many doctors and critical psychiatrists present here, and this is really what I'm more aligned with than our disease model, so I've just sort of had that as a background slide there. I hope it didn't distract you. I skipped forward slightly before I meant to. We need to stop excluding through our construction of difference. And this is why binary constructions are harmful in terms of mental health and people from minority groups. As humans, we love to other people. It's this othering that hinders and disadvantages many of us. We feel far more comfortable when we can put people in boxes, and label. It helps us make sense of our world and our own place in it. And that's helpful sometimes. There's probably evolutionary reasons as to why we naturally do this. But it is rarely helpful, individually or collectively, in a modern society when we consider minority groups and people afflicted with psychiatric diagnoses. Something that comes with No sound scientific evidence. Biopsychiatry is actually an ideology rather than an area of real medicine, as in it uses different rules. It doesn't actually comply with the rest of medicine. The jury is still out regarding the loose theories we've clung to for decades, centred on hormones and chemicals. We haven't yet managed to even hypothesise very well and find conclusive evidence for just one underlying biological mechanism, for just one of the hundreds of so-called disorders that we've named and listed in the manual. We don't know yet if mental illness exists, if it's a real thing. Many consumer academics and critical psychiatrists believe that it is more likely that people think, feel and behave the way they do due to their life experiences. But when consumers say this, we're the crazy people, right? We want to be delusional, we lack insight, we can't win sometimes. That's a whole different topic I've touched on there, different lectures, so I'll end there. So that's the end of my conclusion. Back to my point on binaries. Many things in life are not simply black and white, particularly human beings. When we view our mental health in binary form and view recovery as this linear process, we exclude the nuances of the human condition. It is problematic to place someone distinctly on one side of the binary chart. Mentally well, stable, normal. They're employed and intelligent and they dress well. You know, they're normal people. And we can place someone on the other side where they're mentally ill, sick, they're unstable, they're unemployed, maybe unintelligent, they dress less well. You know, they're abnormal, disordered people. This is not true for many of us who've been diagnosed as mentally sick. Some of us don't fit on either side, or we fit on both sides simultaneously, or we just keep changing sides consistently, and that confuses me. It's not allowed, especially when you're a mental health professional as well. It's very confusing for your colleagues. Some of us occupy the liminal space. I fit both nowhere and everywhere. I just satellite through different states of being. I should not be boxed and labelled, and I reject all the labels that I've been cursed with. They do not reflect who I am in any meaningful, fair or just way. I can have great mental well-being at one juncture, no mental well-being at another juncture. I can have great mental well-being in some ways, and at the same time, not have it in other ways. I can do well for 3 years, and then be in a psychological crisis for 7 weeks, and then regain my previous well-being and continue on my random journey through life. It's my prerogative. So am I sick or not? It's a matter of perspective. Other cultures view things quite differently to our Western culture. They have different approaches and better outcomes. We can slap a label or a psychiatric diagnosis on anyone apparently. It remains in their life forever. A social label that carries huge systemic and structural oppression and social injustice in general, which is often what holds us in our distress patterns. Wouldn't it be better to do away with all of that? Why can't we all just be who we really are, without social expectation, without social and economic segregation, without people having to try and fit a mold, without having to conform to how we're expected to behave and think and feel, without inequity, without inequality, and without injustice. No one should live a label if it's been imposed on them. If we support authenticity, diversity, and difference, we'll start seeing more similarities. A positive and powerful way forward for us all is simply to love and show kindness. Thank you so much for listening today, and I wanted to end just by saying that for those of you who are really interested in mental health and related concepts and anything I might have touched on today, you will find on there a video by Carl Rogers, one of the most famous psychologists of our time, contributed more perhaps arguably than anyone. And there is also a presentation on there by Dr. Peter Breggin, who takes a very holistic and spiritual approach. He did a presentation called Drugs and Spirituality at the International Association of Biblical Counselors Conference in America. So you might really like that one. I thought it was beautiful. Thank you for listening.